Hashem. Today's daf yomi is Menachos Daf Nun Beis, and we're starting on the bottom of Nun Aleph from a Beis. We launch on the bottom. The Gemara discussed that Rabbi Shimon, a Mishnah and Shkolim, where Rabbi Shimon listed the seven Tanaim or Takanos that the court made. So in that context, the Gemara tells us another one of those Takanos. Made a Takana about the para, about the red heifer, shaloyu molin ba'afra, that if you used its ashes, that's not going to be under the rubric of me'ila, that misappropriating temple property. So the Gemara says, why is this a takana of the Rabbanan? This is a dioraisa. This is a biblical law that it doesn't apply to ashes. The me'ila doesn't apply to ashes. The Tanya Chatasi, Lamet Shemolin Ba. He ba moalin, that with respect to the from the word he, we see that you're moal on the paraduma, but ba'afra, but on the ashes ain't moalin. On the ashes there's no meila. So Rav Ashi explains what Rabbi Shimon was saying, that shtei takonos havi. There were two takonos. A diaraisa, biblically speaking, ba moalin, ba'afra a moalin. Biblically speaking, there's me'ila on it, but not on its ashes. And kivin dechazu dekamezalzel, but since they saw that they were being mezalzel, since Rabbanan saw that they were, when they saw that there was no me'ila on the ashes, they were being mezalzel on it. They were disrespecting it. Ka'avda minela makasa, and they were using it as, a way to heal their wounds. So Gazru Bei Me'ila, the rabbis made a decree about Me'ila on it. Kivin Dechazu, the Kaparshi, Misafik Hazaz, but then they saw that if there was a question whether or not you were supposed to do a Hazah, a sprinkling of the ashes, out of a Safik, out of a case of a doubt, Ukmu Adi Araisa. So meaning to say when it was a doubt, they were afraid to get Me'ila. So the rabbi said, no, we reminded everybody that it's a biblical law that there's no Me'ila on the ashes, and they encouraged people to do it in the case of a Safik. Tana Rabbanan, Parel Amdavar Shal Tzibor, which the bull that the community brings if the majority of the community makes a mistaken action on the basis of a mistaken ruling by the Bezdin, or it's the Iri Avodas Kachavim, that's for Avodah Zarah in a similar circumstance. Pitchila Megavin Lahem, Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that they make a collection from them. Everybody has to contribute to this bull. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. B'tchila megabel mehen, Rashi explains that this means komer achshav, now, when they bring it, goven esamos mikol echad ve'echad. And it doesn't come from the Trumas Alishka like other communal offerings. Make a new collection. Rabbi Shimon Omer mitrumas Alishka hein bayin. Rabbi Shimon says it comes from the communal funds, from what was already collected. The Gemara says, "Vatanya Ipcha," but don't we have a brayta that says the opposite? So which one is it first? Is it Rabbi Yehuda? Which one is the correct one? Hai minai lachrisa. Which one was the later one, which is therefore the correct one? Was it Rabbi Yehuda says it comes mitchila, and Rabbi Shimon from the lishka, or the opposite? Rabbi Shimon says mitchila, and Rabbi Yehuda says it's from the lishka. So the Gemara says, "Amru Rabbanan Kamei Rav Ashi Lema." The first one cited, i.e., Rabbi Yehuda says Mitchil, Rabbi Shimon says Shumas, that was the second one taught, and so therefore that's the one we follow. The Shamino Rabbi Shimon, because here Rabbi Shimon saying the Chayeshli Pshia. Rabbi Shimon saying basically we can't collect from everyone because not everyone's going to give. He's concerned about Pshia, he's concerned about negligence, and we know Rabbi Shimon says the same thing, like we said yesterday in the Mishnah about who pays when the Kohen Gadol dies. Do we collect from his heirs, or do we collect it from the community? Rabbi Shimon says we collect it from the community because not everybody, he was concerned for Pshia, that they weren't paying. You could even say it's Basraisa Acharisa, that the latter brisa, which says Rabbi Shimon says Betchila, that came second. Ki Chachayesh Rabbi Shimon Pshia, because here, Rabbi Shimon might not be concerned for Pshia. Why? Because when is Rabbi Shimon concerned for Pshia? And also the Leisbu Kapara Begave, about something where there's no atonement associated with it. Then Rabbi Shimon is concerned about the negligence. In the case of the Minchas Chavitin of the Kohen Gadol, there's no atonement associated with it. But b'milsa the islehu kapara begava, but in a case where there is a kapara with respect to it, Rabbi Shimon is not concerned about pshia under those circumstances, because he says everybody's going to pay because they want to get an atonement. So in this case, it's possible they could say b'tchila. So my havi, what was the conclusion? Amrei Rabba Zuti or Rav Ashi Tashma, bring a brisa the Tanya. It says in the pasuk is Karbani lachmi lishai reach nichochi tishmeru lakrivli b'moado. The extra words Karbani lachmi lishai. What do we learn from all this? So Rabbos paralam never shall tzibor siri avods chavim shabam mitrumas alishka. Rabbi Shimon saying that they come from the communal offerings. So he's not concerned about pshia in a case, communal collections. He's not concerned about pshia. So he is concerned about pshia even in the case of kapara. And then it said in the Mishnah that when the Kohen Gadol dies, either the heirs or the next, the community pays, Ushlema Haisa Kreva, and they bring the Minchas Chavit and the Kohen Gadol Shalem, meaning they bring the full Isaron. So the question is, what does this statement mean? Does it mean that when they are coming to replace the Minchas Chavit and the Kohen Gadol brought every day, do they bring it a complete Isaron in the morning and a complete Isaron in the afternoon, which is double what the Kohen Gadol would bring? He would bring only a half in the morning and a half at night. Or maybe they would bring a full one in the morning and not anything in the afternoon. So it would be the exact same amount. They just would divide it up. So Amarava, let's try and bring a proof, because it says in the Mishnah in Tamid, and it describes a different number of Kohanim that would participate in the Avoda every day. And the Shmini, the eighth Kohen, was needed bechavitim, to bring the Minchas Chavitin to the Mizbeach. Vim Isa debetela bein arbayim, and that was in the afternoon. And if it's the case, like one of the possibilities here we're discussing, is that in the afternoon he wouldn't bring anything. Debetela bein arbayim azim nidol mishkacha leishmini. Then there'll be some times where we wouldn't have an eighth one, and so therefore, from the fact that we list this as one of the roles, that proves that we have. That proves that we have. That it was brought also in the afternoon. Gemara says, and what would be that scenario? Hechi dami, isn't it the case the Meis Kohen Gadol will mino achar tachtav? Wouldn't it be the case where the Kohen Gadol died and didn't put anybody in his place, and then they wouldn't bring it in the afternoon? So we're on the 52A towards the bottom, Boker Tov. So Amru Rabbanan Kamed Rabbi Yirmiyah. When the Rabbanan said this in front of Rabbi Yirmiyah was in Eretz Yisrael, and they repeated the teaching of Rava to answer this question. So the meaning to say that according to Rava, the Kohen Gadol brought it in a full Isaron in the morning and a full Isaron in the afternoon, and he proved it from the Mishnah in Tamid. So they said in front of Rabbi Yirmiyah, and Rabbi Yirmiyah did not appreciate it. He said, "Bavlai tipshai, these foolish Babylonians." Because they sit in a place of darkness, because we know that Babel is called Amukahi, because it says Omer Tzua Harbi, so that Babel is associated with darkness because they sit in a place of darkness. They say a teaching that is dark, i.e., is no lightness associated. Ella de Katani. So the reason Ella de Katani, and I'll prove it to you, because it states Shvi Besoas and Shi B'Yayin. It says the seventh Kohen would bring the flour for the mincha, and the ninth Kohen would bring the wine. Hachinami do batli. Do you think to say that there was never a time where they didn't bring the flour and the wine? But we know that's not the case, because it says mincha samin is game b'layla, mincha samin is game afilu machar. That they could bring it, the mincha and the nesachim, even many days after that. So it's not always the case that they had a seventh or a ninth coin. Ela de ilo katani. So, but it's not talking about those unusual circumstances in the Mishnah Tamid. Hachinami de ilo katani means it's not talking about the case. So don't bring a proof that he brought a full Yisrael in the afternoon from the fact that the Mishnah lists an eighth, because that means that there was never a time where there was an eighth. No, it could have been that the Mishnah is just not talking about the unusual circumstances. Drew Kamei de Rava, they brought back this teaching to Rava. Amar, when the rabbis returned this teaching, he said, "Mipushusin Amri Kamayu, mitivusan lo Amri Kamayu." He said, "You said our worst. You brought our bad teachings. Why don't you bring our best teachings? You made us look bad." V'hadar Amar Rava. Then Rava says, "You know what? I actually was right." V'hadar Amar Rava Hani Nami Tivusa, and this was a good teaching. That which I said. That there's a proof that the Kohen Gadol, that they brought a full Yisrael after the Kohen Gadol died, also in the afternoon, not only in the morning. He says, "I'll prove it to you." Amar Kras soas mincha tamid, harei lecha minchas tamidin. That this shall be for you like the minchas tamidin, which the nesachim of the tamid come in the morning and the night. So therefore, I was correct in saying that. So the Gemara says, "My Havia." Well, what's the conclusion? Yeah, they would bring after the Kohen Gadol died. They brought a full Yisrael in the morning and a full Yisrael in the afternoon. So now we have a related topic. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Pligi ba Abba Yotzi ben Dustai v'Rabbanan. Rabbi Yochanan says that Abba Yotzi ben Dustai. Hold on, slightly different kirza. Or maybe it's Abba Yosef Ben Dustai. Okay, it's the Bach changes it too. The Rabbanan, they had a dispute. Abba Yosef Ben Dustai Omer Mafresh Shnei Kamatzim Shel Avona. So he's of the position that when the Kohen Gadol would bring a full Isaron from his house, he would bring with him 2 kamatzim of Lavona, and he would bring one for the half of the flour in the morning, and the other for the half flour in the afternoon. First of all, we see from here that he had to bring Lavona with his minchas chavitin. This is a new fact which we did not unaware of until this point in the Talmud. So remember, he brings a full Isaron, half in the morning, half at night. But with this full Isaron, Abu Dostai says he has to take 2 scoops of Lavona from his household. 1 scoop for the morning that he puts it on, and 1 scoop for the afternoon. Rabbanan Amri Mafresh Lakometz Echad. No, he separates 1 scoop in the morning. And then he uses Chatzi Kometz Shachritz v'Chatzi Kometz Bein Arbayim. And then he uses half in the morning and half at night. So that's a dispute between Abba Yosef and Dustai and the Rabbanan. And okay, what are they really arguing about? Abba Yosef and Dustai Savar Lo Ashchan Chatzi Kometz Tekar, because we never see a half a kometz that was brought. It's always one kometz, and so therefore you have to do half in the morning and half at night. Rabbanan Savri Lo Ashchan Isaron Debai Shnei Kamatzim. He says we never have another case where you have an Isaron that requires 2 scoops. So how are we going to do this? Who is it going with? So by Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan asks, Kohen Gadol from our scenario, Kohen Gadol Shemes, Uminu V'Lominu Achar Tachtav. Kohen Gadol died, and they didn't yet appoint somebody. So remember, we saw that either the heirs or the community has to pay. We're Rabbanan, according to the Rabbanan, who said that the Kohen Gadol brings a half a kometz for each mincha. Do we say under this circumstances that after the Kohen Gadol died, we said he has to bring a full Isaron in the morning and a full Isaron at night? So now, according to the Rabbanan, who say that it was only a half because it was a half in the morning and half at night, but now we have a full Isaron in the morning. Rabbanan huchpulu lavuna, so low. But now, the rabbis say you have to bring a full kometz of lavona in the morning. Or not? Me, I'm reading mitoch shehuchpulu so also huchpulu lavona so. Do we say because the Isaron is now doubled to a full Isaron in the morning, a full Isaron in the afternoon, so it's doubled, we double the Lavona. Udelma might the goli, might the low goli. Or do we say, the Torah told us that by the flour it's doubled in this circumstance, but didn't say anything about the lavona. Vishemen, but the oil, bein la'aba. But the oil, bein la'aba Yosef ben Dustai, bein Rabbanan Mahu. What would it be, says Rabbi Yochanan? Also, according to the oil. What would be the oil? Not only according to the Rabbanan, but also according to Abba Yosef ben Dustai, because according to the Shemen, well, look at the Rashi here. According to the oil, mibayale aliba the cool. This is a question, even according to Abba Yosef ben Dustai, and for sure according to Rabbanan. Im tzarachavi gimel lugan l'kol isaron. If you have to bring 3 lugan of oil for every isaron, the adshal yamos, because before he died, hayamevi gimel lugan, they would bring 3 lugan of oil. And then they would say the hotzi lug umachza lechatzi isaron neshachar lug umachza lebein arbayim. And they would use half in the morning and half at night. But now what will be the case? So Tashma, let's bring a proof from that which we'll learn later on, says Rava. Amarava Tashma, Chamisha Kamatzim. The Mishnah later on says that there are 5 types of kamatzim that are said with respect to different laws. These are the different types of kamitza. If a person says, Harei alai levona, this is on daf 106b. If he says, I have to bring a lavona, he shouldn't bring less than a kometz. Or if a person says, I'm going to bring a mincha, he has to bring with it a kamitza of lavona. Third case is, if somebody brings a lavona outside the courtyard, he gets kares. And the final 2 are the 2 bezikin of the lechem aponim, they each require 2 kamitzim. So he doesn't count the kamitza of the Kohen Gadol of Minchas Chavitim because he's only talking about it by a Minchas Shalom. But anyway, now we're going back to answer the question about the oil. Chamisha kamatzin. There are 5 kamitzos. Vim Isa, and if we're going to say when the Kohen Gadol dies and they didn't put anybody in his place, they would bring a full lavona. If that would be the case, that even according to the Rabbanan, they would bring a full lavon under that case, zimnin the mishkachas shiva. Then they would have 7 kamitzim, 1 in the morning and 1 at night. So the Gemara says, no, the ilo katani. We're not talking about those scenarios. The Yasser Rav Papa v'kamer lo lahai shmaita. Rav Papa said, was repeating this, that they pushed away Rava's answer. Amalei Rav Yosef bar Shmuel Rav Papa v'amala kometz b'chutz. But this case, which we said, one of the 5 was if you bring the kometz outside the azara. The Iave, that's also an unusual circumstance. Vikotani, and it's listed. So it should be a proof from the fact that it wasn't listed. So the Gemara says, My Avi Allah. What's the conclusion here? Amrav Nachum Bar Yitzchak, Tashma, who bring a proof from a brayso. The Tanya, Kohen Gadol Shemes, V'lominu. So we'll bring a proof from the brayso. Kohen Gadol Shemes, V'lominu Achar Tachtav. And they didn't appoint anybody in his place. Shlema Shachris for Shlema Bayarabayim. They bring a full Yisrael in the morning, full Yisrael in the afternoon. Mafreshla Beis Kamatzin, and then he separates 2 kamitzos. Komet Shachris, Komet Ben Arbayim. So it's clearly he does 2 kamitzos. Mafreshla Shloshus Lugin. Lugum Mechza Shachris, Lugum Mechza Ben Arbayim. So, and he does 1.5 oil. So money, whose position is? Ilay Rabbanan. If you want to say it's the position of the Rabbanan, it doesn't make sense. Why? Because if the lavona is being doubled from 1/2 to 1, so why is the oil staying the same ratio? Abba Yosef ben Dustahi. It must be that this is the position of a Yosef ben Dustahi. In general, he brings 2 kamatzim. In this case, he brings 1 kometz. By Lavona lo hochpula v'Shem lo hochpula. With the Shem Rabbi Yosef ben Dustai lo hochpula Lavona, so Shmeino Rabbana nami lo hochpula. So we see the principle is that this obviously follows the position of Rabbi Yosef ben Dustai, and we say we don't double the Lavona and the Shemen, and even though we have to double the flour after a case where the Kohen Gadol died. The law is like him. Remember, what did Rabbi Yosef ben Dustai say? That you bring a full komets. If the Kohen Gadol died, you bring the Kohen Gadol will bring a full komets every day, and if he died, you wouldn't double that, and you wouldn't double the oil. Meaning, you would bring the komets in the morning of Lavona and the komets in the afternoon. Miyam Rabbi Yochanan Achi, does Rabbi Yochanan really say this? Rabbi Yochanan Lochem Kastam Mishnah, V'tanan Chamisha Kamatzanein. And then the Mishnah Mishnah says there are 5 kamatzim, and if it's the correct, it would be 7. Amorai Nenu Vali B'Rabbi Yochanan. There's 2 Amorai will argue about what does Rabbi Yochanan say. And now we begin the next chapter, just call Menachos post Matzah. And now we're talking about Matzah and Chametz. And this next stuff is a Lebedik daf with also a lot of Agadatas about Chametz and Matzah, which is powerful because today is Shusha and Purim, and we know that the halacha is that 30 days before the holiday, you have to start talking about the holiday. So now we have to start talking about Matzah right away. You have to start talking about Matzah. Kol Menachos post Matzah. So all the Menachos, all the grain offerings that were brought, they had to be brought as Matzah, meaning unleavened. You weren't allowed to allow the dough to rise. Chutz mi chametz shebetoda, with the exception of the Toda offering had 40 loaves, and 10 of those loaves, meaning were chametz. That there were chametz offerings, part of the Toda, that's a Thanksgiving offering, ushtei alechem, and the 2 loaves of bread that are on Shavuos. So, shehim boos chametz, they come as chametz offerings. What's the common denominator? Both of them, both Shtei Lechem and the Korban Toda, represent a person who's achieved great spiritual heights. Like the culmination of our spirituality is to have gratitude to Hashem. And Shtei Lechem is with the Torah of Shavuos. So both of them, Chametz is only after a person has achieved such strong spiritual strength. Meir Omer has-Sa'or. So what is the Sa'or? Sa'or, they obviously didn't have yeast that you buy in a package. So how would they get the dough to ferment? They would take sourdough, or they would let dough, mix it with flour with water, and they would let it sit until it became sourdough, and then it would be yeasty. So what will you do? They would do Sa'or bodo emitochan. What does that mean? They would take the dough, the yeast, the sourdough, they would take it from within the flour. There would be Rashi says, mitoch isaron. There would be an isaron of flour, the todo shtei lechem, hayam motzi Sa'or. And they would take out the sourdough. Shayu lash min hasoes, they would knead from the flour ma'at. They would take out a little bit of the flour, afterwards measured, Vitomno besoas umitchametz, and they would knead it, and they would allow it to ferment on its own, and then they would put that back in umimenu mechametz es hashar, and that's how the rest would be fermented. Basically, they would take out a little bit of flour, knead it with water from the isaron, and then it would become yeasty, and then they would put it back in, and that's how they got the fermented dough. The isaron, there was an isaron of flour. They would take a little bit of it out, let it ferment, and then put it back in. This is for the or the Toda. So that's where Meir says that Bodo emitochon mechamtzon. Rabbi Yehuda Omer afi ina mira mufchar. Rabbi Yehuda says no, that's not the right way to do this. Because that wouldn't ferment properly under those circumstances. Ella maybe a sasor. You bring a nice piece of sourdough from his house, and you put it straight into the isaron, into the utensil, and then you fill it up and you add in the flour. Meaning you take a piece of sourdough, you don't take it from the utensil, from the isaron. You take your own piece of sourdough and you put it in. No, so tochamido mamale and then you fill it up. Amrlo, they said to him, Afi aitachasero yisero. Then it wouldn't be exact. Meaning to say, Rashi says, let's say the sourdough was very thick and it was kneaded with a little bit of water, then it wouldn't have the same type of volume. Uh, and so basically, you wouldn't be able to have the right amount. Wouldn't be the same ratio with everything. So that's the issue. And so therefore, the Chachamim don't like that approach. Okay, so that's today's daf. We continue now, but that's today's daf. So